Zach. So welcome to the boutique.
Hello?
We're going to be discussing today just encouraging other men to speak out to about relationship abuse and even family abuse. Because I know as men we like to keep it inside and don't want to say anything to anybody due to pride. But as two individuals that have went through it, I went through it in a relationship, and I just thought that it would change over time, and that if I kept changing, that it would eventually get better. And after 3.5 years, almost 4 years, I found that not to be the case. And so Zach had reached out about speaking on the same subject, and I said I think that'd be an awesome topic to speak on.
Yeah, it was crazy because when we first met, it was like at the motorcycle training course. And, it was weird because it was just like something that just happened.
Right.
You know what I mean? It was like, what was it, like 2 or 3 days that we were out there? And after that, we just started talking, and then we met up at a motorcycle event, PP1 in Houston. And, it just took off from there, and then we started working together, started getting closer. And when it comes to, the whole abuse subject, it was like, I went through it all my life. It was like I started when I was a kid. My parents separated when I was 5. Then my biological mother had gotten with some guy that she's still with now, and it just was terrible the whole time. It was like he bashed me because I looked like my dad, or they would beat me because of just stupid situations.
Wow.
And it was a tough situation growing up until I was about 12. But during that whole time, they were supposedly like churchgoers, and they supported God. Go every Wednesday, go every Sunday.
Right.
And it was hard for me to comprehend that as I grew up. Like, is that really what Christians are about? Is that really what I want to be like? And obviously it wasn't. But
in retrospect, what do you think would have helped you the most as a young man going through that?
With the family situations?
Right.
I don't know. I think trust in the process a little bit more. Like, it goes with everything in your life. You fixate on something so hard that the rest of the stuff is kind of blurred. And I think if I focused on a little bit more of the good parts and things instead of like, oh, they're two-faced and everybody's, talking mess inside church and then outside of church, I think it would have been a lot better for me if I just fixated on the good things.
Right.
Because they go hand in hand. For every good, there's a bad.
Right.
And, you go through the worst part of your life before you get to the best part.
Yeah.
So I think when I was younger, I think if I fixated more on that, I think it would have been a lot better for me, and it could have helped me. I wouldn't change anything that happened back then because it made me who I am today.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think if I would have struggled a little bit less if I fixated on something different.
That's good. And then moving forward into, you had spoke about you were in an abusive relationship as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think all my life, from the time I was, getting abused as a child and moving on into adulthood, I think it was more or less trying to find something that will make it feel a little bit better. So I just went with anybody that, could give me the time of day, I guess you would say. But it started getting really bad, especially my last relationship.
Can I speak on the progression of what that abusiveness looked like at first? Kind of the red flags, and then how that progressed into...
My thing is, I gave people too many chances. Like, they would mess up, or, they cheated on me, or, they would even slap me sometimes. When I was in high school, I had a freaking girlfriend that would slap me inside school. But we stayed together for a year and a half.
Why do you believe so?
Just she was there. She didn't leave. I don't know. That's the only thing I can think of now.
Yeah.
But, it went from that, and then to a girl that cheated on me, and we broke up and got back together 5 times. And then it was the same thing until I met my wife now. But my last one is what really struck the chord for me. It was like, no, you need to stop.
Yeah.
And I actually had a kid with her. That was my first child when I was 21. But before we had the kid, we were together off and on for 3.5, 4 years.
Right.
And I was with her, I say 3.5, probably 3 years before my kid was born, because I met her when I was 18.
So, and you think a lot of people stay in the situations they're in due to comfort and just kind of fear of the unknown. It's like I know this person, and the good heart, because most people intuitively want to expect the best out of people, even when they see sometimes the worst in people, and they think it's just, oh, this is a moment, this is who they are sometimes, or only when I make them mad, so I'm not going to make them mad anymore. I'm going to try to avoid that. And I think that's the fallacy in toxic relationships, because in toxic relationships, everybody else can see it but the people that are in it.
Yep.
You know, because everybody's like, hey, get out of it, you know. And at first, you know, you're like, nah, it's okay, it's changed. But then when it goes on and you go to the people and you complain to them like, oh my gosh, now she's doing this, it's like, dude, I'm trying to tell you. It's like, no, trust me. And then it starts getting into the spot where you start getting alienated from your friends even.
Mm-hmm.
And then it gets to your family. They start saying something like, hey, you're changing. And then before you know it, you're alienating your family.
Yep.
You know, and I think that's the whole unwinding and unspiraling of that. And it's not sustainable. And so that's what I would say to anybody that's in one of those relationships that are seeing the red flags and are kind of ignoring them and thinking, if I just keep changing, I would say, especially if you're at a spot where you're already alienating from your friends or if you're alienating from your family, stop, reevaluate, and truthfully make the hard decision, because it only gets harder the longer you go, and it's only filled with more regret because so much time passes.
Well, of course, it's a lot easier said than done.
Absolutely.
Me and you went back and forth to that same thing. I remember when, you know, you and I were talking about it, and the similarities in between my ex-fiance and
right.
your ex was like jammed, like almost identical.
Yeah.
And it was just, of course, I'm over here, I already left her, and, you know, she left me, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It was a whole situation, but I was already I separated myself from that because I told her, I was like, this is the last time. I was like, if this happens again, there is no going back.
Yeah.
And of course it happened again.
Yeah, I think there's got to be something so, like, transformative to happen for it to really to happen. Because, like, when I broke with my ex, I was in California and she was back home when all this happened, and my family was calling me, and she told me to get my truck and bike and throw my clothes out and stuff, and there's nothing I can do about it. I'm in California.
Yeah.
So I was just like, hey, well, this is it. I still have a week before I go home. And so it was a week of that distance to really clarify, because when you say, oh, I'm leaving, and you go down the street, and then one phone call later is like, hey, we'll come back over, just get your stuff, or hey, let's talk about it. Then you're right back in the loop. And so I would say to anybody to take that break, and not like, hey, just a break but like to truly distance yourself and see if you find that peace within that little bit of time. And I'm not talking about like middle school, let's take a break, I'm going to talk to other people and stuff. No, just for yourself, you know? So that'd be my piece of advice.
I think my biggest thing was I lost who I was. During that whole time, from the time I was small all the way up to like 21 years old, I didn't know who I was anymore.
Right.
I was like, because I was constantly changing for the person I was with, because I was like, maybe it's me.
That's right.
So I would change consistently, just over and over and over again. I would change what I was doing. I would change my hobbies. I would change just about everything.
Sure.
And, you know, right when that last little bit hit, like right in those last like month, I was just like, you know what? I'm not changing anything. And that's when it just started to really crumble, when I wasn't changing who I was. And
Yeah.
she didn't love me for who I was at that time.
Right.
I was like, I know for a fact this is not it. And then it was almost a year that I went without being with anybody. But in that year, I know you don't find anything. You don't find love when you're looking for it. You know what I mean?
Right.
But I was finding myself. I didn't realize I was. You know, it was a hard time, especially for the first like 5 or 6 months, and it was just consistently her calling and her trying to bash me. You know what I mean? And it was hard. And I'm finally to the point where I'm not completely over it. You know, there's still parts of me that wish that didn't happen at all. But at the end of the day, it is what it is.
Everything you're not makes you everything you are, you know?
Yeah.
And the best piece of advice I'd received after, you know, getting out of a toxic relationship was, if you could love the wrong one that much, imagine how much you can love the right one. And I think that's what really encouraged me. It was like, okay. And after I got out of that last relationship, it was the mental clarity and mental fortitude of like, okay, I'm no longer gonna try what I've been doing, which I was trying to seek it myself and find the one, and then I was realized, okay, the relationships I've had even since elementary was me doing that same strategy, which is the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna stop what I'm doing, what I've been doing, and I'm going to start by doing the total opposite. And so now, like, I've been at the most peace I've ever been at in my life. I'm not seeking anything. I'm not looking for anyone. And I know the Lord will send the one. So it's a different mentality, and it's a lot of mental clarity, because you don't realize how much time and effort you put into when you're trying to find somebody, especially if you get that relationship. When you're trying to find the one, you're like, well, I got to talk to a bunch of them to figure out if I even like them in dates.
That's a lot of energy.
That's so much. I mean, you got to entertain 3 people in a day, 2 to 4 people in a day to like, hey, what are you doing? Oh, not much. And all the way across the board, it's just, that's too much. I mean, and then I say love is not only blinding, but love is binding.
Yep.
When, because you can get into soul ties and the whole deeper level thing, but I'm just saying just that you starting off as a friendship with someone of the opposite sex, it immediately kind of becomes more, and then it becomes like I think it's harder for men that have never had girls as friends to have girls as friends. They've only ever had girlfriends. So when we're just like, oh, she's my girlfriend, in that process, we're essentially getting close enough to become girlfriend and boyfriend, never keeping that line and boundary. And so I think that's what, like, I really had to step away from even that. I was like, okay, this isn't.
Yeah, I think it was my junior year. My friend group was me, Daniel, and Sam.
Right.
And then it was Sam had his girlfriend. He like never hung out with us during that, which it was very toxic for him. But it was me and Daniel and 4 girls, and we would always hang out and strictly friends. You know what I mean? We would go to like concert in Austin. We would hang out at the house. We would, they would paint and stuff at the house. It was a bunch of stuff in high school that we did. But I couldn't hang out with them during when I was in a relationship. And in high school, I was like always in a relationship. Besides senior year, I really didn't. I went back and forth between a lot of things. But it was just, it was hard, especially right after high school, not having anybody, because I moved to Tennessee back to Tennessee for a few months. I think it was like 4 or 5 months or something like that, and then I moved back.
So how soon before your wife, the relationship before that, how soon did you start seeing red flags?
Right away. I just ignored them.
Right.
I mean, the first red flag that I saw was, for one, we both worked at Chili's as a waiter and waitress.
Yeah, that's a red flag for sure.
Yeah. But I just moved back from Tennessee to Texas, so I was like, I need a job, so I started at Chili's. And right off the bat, right when we started talking, we were talking, we weren't really in a relationship, but we were getting to know each other, trying to exclude ourselves from any other female or male at that point, so, and then she slept with 2 guys during that time. And I remember being so mad because it was just so easy for her to admit it at that time, and I ended up forgiving it and being like, oh, we're not in a relationship yet, but that was a big red flag. That was like, I should have seen that from a million miles away. Yeah. But I didn't. I ignored it. And then right after that, a couple months later, I didn't go hang out with my friends. It was one night that, me and her were constantly hanging out at that point, and Daniel and my whole friend group was like, hey, let's go do something real quick. They came to Chili's and was like, hey, let's go. I was like, no, I gotta hang out with her. And I remember Daniel getting so mad, because I had planned this with them for like a week and a half. Right. And I just said no right then, and he didn't even help me move. We moved into the apartment a month later, and he was still mad, and he didn't come help me. But I understand why. I was being a totally different person at that point, so it was a rough couple of years, that's for sure. I'll tell you that much. It was not for the weak, that's for sure.
So what advice would you give to a young male adult, and it may even apply to some young females that are going through um, maybe not even just verbal abuse, but just any form of abuse at home, and they feel like this is just my life. What kind of words of encouragement or advice would you give to them?
To the people that you love and can trust outside of the relationship, and they're giving you advice. They're not giving you advice to hurt you or to make you mad or anything. They're doing that because they actually care about you and love you. And I would take into consideration of what they're saying, because I got advice from everybody because everybody wanted a piece of me to hear it, but there's only a select few that was like, you know, I've seen this when you guys been around, you've not been the same, but I ignored it.
Right.
And now I'm like, why didn't I listen? You know, I've always been the person to learn the hard way, so it was always like, oh, she did this and this and this. And I'll be like, oh, I don't care. Let me just find out for myself. She won't do that with me.
Yeah.
So, yeah, where that left me.
Yeah.
So that's the key thing. It's just trusting the people that are around you. If you put the right people around you, I mean, they're going to tell you the right thing. I mean, even when we started hanging out together and you were working with me out in California,
yeah.
I've been like, hey, I mean, I'm with you either way, but you might want to take a little step back and look at the situation a little bit. But, I mean, that was the same way. I mean, I had a couple of friends and family that did the same thing for me, but I never listened to them.
Right.
You know?
I think that's one of the biggest keys is when you are alienating yourself from the people you love the most. That should be the biggest red flag to yourself.
Yep.
Of knowing that, hey, I'm going into this isolation that from the people that love me the most. They're not saying this information just to say the information or to try to make you mad. But in that moment, in that season in your life, you're so blinded, and it's just like, I mean, there's me. We're talking about from experience. It's just like, you may even get mad hearing this, you know, but it's just, it's so real, because I remember it wasn't long ago, you know, and I was hearing the people telling me, hey, man, you need to stop, you need to get out of a relationship, like, just from outside looking in, no hard feelings, I'm just saying my part, and I'd be like, yeah, whatever, and then thinking like, yeah, I'm not answering their call again. And, really start distancing.
Well, you kind of had to answer my call.
And then even my family, they were saying the same thing, and I was just like, oh, stop, And so anytime they bring it up, I'm like, stop. And because I wasn't listening, Proverbs says, a wise man sees trouble and retreats, but the foolish keep going and are punished. And when you see those red flags, it's not just a red flag like, oh, hey, it's a warning. It's not a yellow flag. It's a red flag like, hey, stop. Stop what you're doing and evaluate what's going on. And do not be caught in the fallacy of thinking, oh, they're going to change, and if I just change a little bit, it's so fake. And so the only way someone's going to stop doing what they're doing is if they want to do it. No matter how much advice you give, no matter how much, you try to make them feel guilty or anything like that. It's just, it is what it is. And people really have to hit a rock bottom to realize that Christ is the rock at the bottom, and not even to turn it into a religious thing. But you have to reach a point of you're saying, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, I mean, just recently, I think it was 4 months ago, or maybe a little bit longer, maybe about 5 months ago, we started going to a church in Tomball. And, everybody says that even people that don't go to church, that when they go to church, they hear something every single time they go that revolves around them or their life, that something in the scripture that they say that day. It's like, how is it every time I go there? They say something about, what I'm going through or what I've been through or something like that.
Right.
And it just, since I've been going there, it's just I've wanted to, now I'm trying to get into teaching a student class, there, and attending every Sunday I can. I mean, if we're in town or out of town, obviously I can't go.
Right.
But it was hard for a long time to try to find something for a church because of the family abuse when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And I would go to a church and just not want to go anymore because I would see like one red flag in my eye.
Right.
And it would just deter me from going back, and I just didn't want to go.
And I think that's what's so detrimental about the perspective of it, because we don't go. You weren't hurt by God. You were hurt by people,
Yep.
and the people aren't the church. You know what I mean? And it's like they are, but it's the same way. If you go to the hospital and you're like, well, I'm not going to be sick here because these people are sick.
Yeah.
It's a hospital. You know,
Yeah.
there's other sick people. You know, knowing, but it's there so people can get better together, and it's tough. You know what I mean? Especially, like I said, it's tough for sick people to be around other sick people. It's just like, how can I get healed if I'm not doing that? But it's the whole thing I grew up on, and that's why I've never been hurt by religion, is because I didn't grow up in religion. All I knew was relationship. I grew up in a non-denominational church. I mean, I didn't even know what a church looked like until I was 12 years old, and I was like, church, what is this?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is like a seminar in a way, talking about something I've never heard before. And the first sermon he ever preached was, it's not religion, it's relationship. He said, I'm not coming here to tell you to be a Catholic. I'm not telling you to come here and be, anything else. He said, nowhere in the Bible does it say be a denomination.
Yep.
He says, love God and love others.
It's building that relationship with
And
him.
he said, that's the thing. You must first love Christ, love yourself, love others. And when you can do those things, because if you first know how to love yourself, you don't know how to love others. If you don't know how to love God and have fear for God, you can't love yourself. And so it's this hierarchy of love that overflows abundantly. And so that was the whole thing for me, is like I said, I didn't go in there and look to the people and see what they had going on and say, oh, how are they Christians? You know, I never even associated with that. It was just like, okay, I'm going to hear this information and I'm going to apply it. If he's telling me, hey, pray and do this, or fast and do this, and seek and he shall answer, I was just like, okay, I'm going to do it on my own time. And then for it to actually to work, it was just like, no way.
Yeah.
I remember being like 12 years old praying for an iPod. Most selfish thing I could, you know?
Yeah.
And then received it. Literally got an iPod out of nowhere. And I was like, I'll never download dirty music on it. And as soon as I did, I was on the bus, got this guy downloading music on it. I kid you not, that same week, I'm doing homework, have the iPod right here in my lap. I go to lean over, and it falls, and I had a tub of butter, but it was empty and washed out, so I had cereal in it. So it was a big bowl. iPod falls right into it. Try to put it in rice, didn't work. iPod ruined. So within like a 3-week span, got the iPod and got it taken away, right after that. So I was like, no way. And so it's just, it's a silly story, but it's so real.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, I heard something, I think it was a couple months ago. It was about, like, there's a lot of religions, right?
Right.
But in the Bible, there's not one thing that you can take from the Bible and apply it to your life and it won't make your life better.
Absolutely.
I mean, religion or not.
Right.
I mean, you apply it to your life, 100% it will make your life better.
Right.
I mean, there's not one thing in there. And that changed a lot of how I saw it, because religion or not, you apply, I mean, be kind to others, all the 10 Commandments. You apply that, I mean, your life is going to be much better than if you didn't.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Even the tithing, dude. I'm saying the financial structure, it says 10%.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not rules, it's a structure. It's saying, hey, if you want to be the best you can be, take this structure. Like, here it is right here in this little book, in this pamphlet. Take it, apply it to your life. Your relationship with your family is going to be great. Relationship with your kids, all the things, if you actually follow it, what it says. But nobody wants to read it, and they just take from what they've seen or their family or grandma's relationship, and it's like, oh, my grandma was super uptight and I don't want that to be me, and it's just like, no, if you actually read it, it's just like, oh, I see.
Man,
And
it goes
I
back
tell
to
anybody
all the-
start in Proverbs. Just please, if you're wanting to get into the Bible, it's not a book you read from front to back. It's not a novel like that. Mark, Luke, and John, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John is the gospel. And if you want to start getting into that, start with Proverbs and read those as well. If you read those hand in hand, telling you.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, I mean, the relationship and the whole Christian world is the same with relationships with the abusive relationships. I mean, it's the same thing. I mean, you're putting yourself in a bad spot. I mean, I did for 21, 22 years. And, But, I mean, it's the same concept, though. I mean, you go to church, you're trying to build a relationship with God, and you're outside of church trying to build a relationship with God, your family, and everybody else, and it's just can't always be a people pleaser, and that's what I come to realize the past couple of years, because everyone's not gonna bend to the right thing, if that makes sense. But
So, is there any last things that you would say to either young adults or even to older people that are in relationships, or like I said, not even just relationships, and abusive home as a young kid?
love yourself first. I mean, if you don't, like you said, I mean, if you don't love yourself, you're not gonna have enough love to have to other people. Love yourself, trust, and put people that are around you that you can trust and that you know that they love you, that can give you the right advice. Those two things, if you can love yourself and have that around you, I mean, those relationships, when it comes to abuse, would be, very limited. I mean, you can only handle and keep out of your life so much, right? There's gonna be stuff that hits. There's gonna be relationships that are gonna be bad. But it's your responsibility to keep yourself. Oh, is this a good relationship for me to be in, or is this not? Or if this is something worth fighting for, or if it's not. How many times has this happened in this span of time? I mean, same thing with finances. The percentages of stuff that happens and makes you a different person or a better person or a worse person. If you see yourself a year in the relationship, a completely different person from the beginning to the end, you need to figure something out.
Yeah, and not in a good way.
No.
Yeah.
You need to figure something out with that relationship or with yourself or something. Is it you? Is it them? My thing is, if you're gonna change yourself for the good, for you, not for anybody else, but for you.
Yeah.
And if you can change yourself for yourself, and if it's something that hey, I shouldn't be doing this, for example, this and that, and I need to change that to make myself better so I can put my best self out there.
Yeah.
That's one thing.
And if you start changing for the good and the spouse starts doing the opposite as far as like hating, why are you going to the gym? You want to look better for other people? Yeah. Oh, you want to stop drinking or stop smoking? You think you're better than me now?
Red flag, red flag.
Yeah.
Red flag.
then like, okay, this is it. Like it's not a spot for you to stop doing those things. It's not like, oh, you're right, I stopped going to the gym. Like
it's not a hunch anymore. It's this is what's happening, and you need to get out.
Yeah. Because that right on your second point is you have to not just hear the advice that the people are saying that love you. You have to actually apply it. Like actually listen to it. And so take the blinders off.
Had them on for a long time. If people hear this and actually it affects one person and helps them, I mean, it'll make me feel good inside, because I mean, I've been keeping a lot of this stuff in because I don't tell anybody. I kept it in for a long time because until I met you and heard that you were going through the same exact relationship with me, I never really talked to anybody about it.
Right.
Because I didn't feel the need of saying it, or because I was just keep on going in that revolving door. It's like going to New York and going to a freaking hotel and going around that door over and over and over again. It just kept happening. Yeah. And then found my wife, and of course I told my wife everything. She's my wife. But you were the first person outside of there that I was able to talk to about that, because I saw you go through the same stuff.
Yeah.
So.
Amen. Zach?